Now I would like to invite Mr. Khaled Ahmed to present his paper.
Our conclusion was that maybe around 50 journalists were killed in the past decade. But when we were having our in-camera discussion in the morning, we were told by our colleagues from other regions that the number is actually 102. I cannot really disagree because these are very tough times for Pakistani journalists. Some of the narrative that we came across in the morning in our in-camera session tends to agree more with the international narrative about us, what the world is telling us about our events. And it is quite surprising that people who conform to the international narrative are feeling under pressure, not only from the terrorists, but also from state agencies. This is a very crucial factor in Pakistan because the energy and the intensity behind the habit of denial in Pakistan comes from the fact that the real narrative in Pakistan is concealed. And it is only rare that the contours of this real narrative come to the fore. And one person who lost his life because he told the real story was Salim Shahzad. And now we have a judicial commission inquiring into the facts of what happened to him. And I hope that some part of the real story might come out, although there is very little hope. The fact is that when you have a national narrative which mixes up with nationalism and ideology, it is very difficult to introduce the country to reality and facts. Journalism is one profession in which facts are conveyed, and journalism is therefore under pressure to somehow not present those facts which don't agree with the national narrative. And this has become now very stark. In the discussions in the morning, we discovered that the reality is quite the opposite of what we are describing to the world. Therefore, it is very difficult for the state to mutate itself for survival. The real secret of survival is the ability of a species to mutate. And change of policy is only possible if facts are placed before the people. And even if you have democracy and it lacks presentation of facts, it's going to be very difficult for the state to change its policy to actually survive and save itself. One big disadvantage of today's journalism, we call today's subject journalism under pressure, that if you put journalism under pressure, the state suffers in the shape of its inability to actually change policy to survive. The tragedy of Pakistan today is that a majority of us, without much blame, believe in a counter-narrative, and we undertake an isolationist position because we want to actually say no to what the world is telling us. I think we have reached a point where we should start, one, allowing our journalists to be able to report freely. Second, that we should listen to the world as it tells us what is happening to us. Now we come to the problem of why it is not possible for journalists to report the truth and lay the facts before the people. First is, of course, the writ of the state, and that is something which is quite obvious in the state of Pakistan, that in all areas the writ of the state is either weak or absent, and 60% of the territory it is almost absent, which means that somebody else holds power there and calls the shots. In the areas which are under proper writ of the state, there is increasingly a trespass from those areas where there is no writ of the state, because the terrorists who rule in those ungoverned spaces have to survive financially. So they will They've become predatory and they come into the cities, and their extortions then spread a counter authority against the state itself. Second is the pledge of the state for journalism. The state has to be democratic. It has to protect journalism. If it wants to actually benefit from true reporting, it has not only to pledge the protection of journalism, but also to accept some of the flaws of journalism. That is what has happened all over the world, where journalism has contributed to the construction of the state and to its survival. So we have to accept that the state will commit itself to the protection of journalism and its fundamental principles, not of indoctrination, but of conveyance of facts, conveyance of true information. Second is, if you don't have writ of the state, do you have law and order in the areas where the state still has its writ? And you will find that in most of the cities, law and order is not in proper shape. If you don't have law and order, it is very difficult for a journalist to actually pursue his profession and not come to harm. And what is his protective mechanism? If he doesn't want the harm to come to him, what does he do in the face of these forces which actually don't want him to report? And we'll find that our journalism has reacted to this force in various ways. And it's interesting to note how we have tried to save our skin by either not reporting, second, actually joining the force of the powerful, thirdly, by taking on a worldview of extremism, which means that somehow we become part of the society trying to suit itself to the coming order, which they think is an extreme order. Since they can't fight it, they want to prepare themselves by becoming extremist. And this is what has happened to a section of Pakistani journalism, which is now predominantly TV journalism, which means that it's predominantly in our mother tongue, in Urdu, in the national tongue. And it means that there is a growing divorce between what we say in English and what we say in Urdu. This is something that has to be studied. I don't think our universities have really actually studied the effects the conquering or the conquest of the national language by ideology and by extremism has on society. If you look at our English and Urdu journalism, you will find that Urdu actually scrutinizes the state of Pakistani nationalism, which is highly emotive, where the description is no longer logical or sequential, but appeals to our sense of nationalism. Second is the adherence to ideology. Again, you'll find the adherence to ideology in the English language is much weaker than in the Urdu language. Third is the factor which I think we have to look at very carefully, and that is intimidation. We have seen in the areas where the state has either lost its wits or writ or has been defeated, that people come under intimidation and adopt the posture of the tormentor. This is what has happened in Swat. This is what is happening in the half-conquered territories of Bajor. You'll find this in Orakzai, although our army is fighting a battle there. But the people are responding to the overwhelming force of the Taliban and the terrorists. This is what is happening also in parts of South Waziristan and North Waziristan. Amazingly, another province which is under the threat of these alien forces is Balochistan, where half of it is being threatened by an indigenous nationalism which is secular in nature, the other half by an extremely religious, externally injected ideological force which is actually compelling people to change their way of life and to conform to the ideology of the aliens who have entered Balochistan. The next very dangerous step is how does the politician react to the absence of the writ of the state? And you will find that he, instead of opposing criminal elements, is interfacing with them. Because of disempowerment over the years, the only way the politician can empower himself is by joining up with the violent mafias. And it has happened in Karachi. We learned today that it has happened also in Lahore, but in much less measure. If that happens, it becomes much more difficult for a journalist even to reveal facts about governance in Pakistan. Although I believe that there is one blessing that freedom of journalism in Pakistan, which cannot be ignored, is the revelations made about the corruption of those who rule us. But there is a kind of imbalance, because if you don't report as effectively on terrorists who challenge the ideology of the state and challenge the legitimacy of the government, if you can't offer criticism of their activity at the same intense level, it becomes very unjust and unbalanced to target only the governance of the state. Today, I think the world is right in saying that Pakistan is a very dangerous state. As a journalist, I can say that indeed it is very difficult, very dangerous for journalists to survive in this country. In the morning, when we were talking to our colleagues from Balochistan, Sindh, and Fatah and Frontier, we discovered that their lives are very difficult. It's very difficult to survive in these circumstances, especially in the conflict zone, where the state forces and the terrorists are actually face to face. And for the journalists to actually report factually is become very difficult. There are cases where the terrorists have come in, intimidated the person, and if he has not abided by their advice, he's been killed. We've also seen that the state agencies have done the same thing in some cases. So it is very difficult for somebody who wants to convey facts to the nation to survive in these circumstances. In the cities, as I said, the marauding activity of these people who live in the ungoverned spaces has seriously violated law and order in the cities. Peshawar is one big example where Mangal Bagh, who is in the Khyber agency, collects his money from Peshawar. He's pauperized a lot of people by demanding from them the kind of wealth that they couldn't really afford to give. And there are some people who have actually appeared on television and said, we've been pauperized just to save our lives. To give you one example, which has been actually quoted in the paper that I've written, I picked it up from another paper which was written about what happened. This happened actually to me when I was working in Daily Times. I was writing the editorials. And in the second editorial, I wrote, I described Mangal Bagh, the warlord of Khyber, as a thief. My assumption was that since the editorial is going to be in English, Mangal Bagh will not be able to read it. But Mangal Bagh was conveyed from Peshawar by somebody the real meaning of the word thief. At this point, he sent his boys to our office in Peshawar, picked up our reporter, and took him to Khyber agency. For the next 3 hours, Mangal Bagh put his foot on the head of my reporter and said that I'm sharpening my knife and I'm going to kill this man. I'm going to behead this man until he tells me who wrote the editorial. Luckily, somebody got through to me in Lahore and said Mangal Bagh is going to kill the reporter, and I begged him to put me in touch with Mangal Bagh. And I apologized to him. I think I started crying or something. And I got him off. But let me tell you also that it has happened in other cases also. I've done it many times. I've become habituated to touching terrorists' feet and saying, please forgive me, I'm not going to write again. This gives you some idea of what journalism is all about. And I'm talking about myself. I write in English, where you can say a lot of things, even today. But if you are doing Urdu, it is very difficult to tell the truth. With the rise of television, we have seen the rise of Urdu. We tried a couple of channels in English, they didn't work, and now the entire electronic media is actually in the national language. Now with this language comes the discourse. The discourse of this language is still very nationalist, very ideological, and essentially in terms of discourse very non-sequential and non-logical. It appeals to what is called honor or ghairat. That is the kind of word we use. It appeals to our ghairat. Ghairat is the quality of the tragic Greek hero who is small, who is less powerful than the universal forces. He challenges them and he dies in the process, and that is the highest point of honor is actually death. And the highest point of wisdom, of course, is survival, but that doesn't occur in Urdu. In Urdu, it is clashing with somebody who's more powerful than you and justifying your honor thereby. But this is not the discourse in English. It is in Urdu. Now, what happens next is the intensification of the extreme view. Now, that is what has happened in the Pakistani electronic media, that there is an extreme point of view, and the TV anchors take great pleasure in presenting extreme views. The discourse on television is in the shape of argumentation. And the argumentation is not backed by any research or by any statement of objectively viewed phenomenon, but putting together of two opposed interlocutors. And they go at each other's throat, and the discourse, of course, becomes very low, and people start enjoying the lowness of what discussion takes place. Now, as a contrast, let me tell you that in India, the TV channels are mostly devoted to entertainment. In our case, they are mostly devoted to political discussion. And the political discussion is on very extreme lines. And let me say, I hope I'm not too wrong, and you will agree with me, that the TV anchors contribute a lot to this extremism on the television. And the backing of that national narrative, which rejects the outside world and makes Pakistan into a very isolationist country. Some of the journalists who spoke in the morning in our in-camera session, I have great sympathy for them, because their minus point is that while describing their own reality, they keep on confirming the international narrative about what Pakistan is doing and why Pakistan is in denial. And my reading is that you are in denial because you are not in possession of facts. And the facts are not presented because the man whose duty it is to present you with facts is under intimidation. He can get killed, he can be picked up and made to disappear for many days till somebody pays his ransom. And those days are a period of nightmare. You cannot expect a person to be normal again after he's released from his confinement. These are facts that we have to face today. And today's theme is devoted to what journalism is facing in Pakistan. This is not the story that you will hear from anyone else. Not from the Pakistani diplomat, not from the Pakistani institutions. This you will only hear from people who are in the conflict zone, people who live in areas where they are constantly threatened by both sides. Because the national narrative, one, it has been adopted by the state, then has the force of the agencies behind it. And the agencies are pretty uncontrolled in Pakistan. And when somebody gets killed, there is ambivalence about who's actually killed him. And the Judicial Commission now, trying to find out the facts about Salim Shahzad's death, will have to decide whether it was the state who killed him or the people that he was really revealing facts about. And there are other, for instance, Salim Shahzad was killed, but there is another extraordinary person who's a girl from Kohat, who's written very extensively about Orakzai. And let me tell you, I didn't believe the book. But gradually, as I come to have more and more knowledge through other sources, I believe that her book, which is based on 2,000 interviews carried out in the Orakzai Kohat area, is actually telling the truth. And her facts are completely opposite to what the state of Pakistan is saying to the world. It is an amazing confirmation of the international narrative about Pakistan. I'm not in sympathy with the international narrative, but I'm in sympathy with the findings of our own boys and girls who do journalism in Pakistan. With these words, I will leave the rostrum for other discussants, people who want to give their point of view. But today, I don't think this is the finest hour in Pakistani journalism. Thank you.